to rip into this one. If you're out of the loop here, basically it was announced a couple years ago that Sia would be making the move to directing film. This is her feature film debut, I believe. And the story was going to be about a kid on the autism spectrum, or feature a kid on the autism spectrum. And then as news slowly trickled out about this, it revealed how little she actually cares about people on the autism spectrum. Like, first it started off with firing the original actress who was on the spectrum because Sia wanted to put in her little protege, Maddie Ziegler, in the role. And when she got criticized for that by actual actors on the spectrum, she basically insulted them and said they weren't any good anyway. And then it just continued to spiral after the fact. Like, she paired up with Autism Speaks, which is, within the autism community, it's considered a hate group because they essentially treat autism as a disease in need of curing, and which is basically like saying, oh, we have to cure Down syndrome, or we have to cure schizophrenia. You can't cure that. That's not a disease. It's not like, a viral infection. This isn't something that you can just, take fluids and some antibiotics and it'll be gone. This is a condition. It would be like saying multiple sclerosis needs to be cured. You can't really cure that. It's like this is just something the body does in the infinite number of variables during gestation and development. It's the idea that you would have to cure that is insane, and yet Sia decided, oh, perfect organization to team up with. They got the puzzle pieces and everything. With the crazy part being that as the movie was closer to coming out, Autism Speaks, which thinks we need to be cured, saw the writing on the wall and said, we denounce this movie. We have nothing to do with this movie. So even they saw how awful this whole thing was and how awful Sia was acting, and just completely going mask off, just ableist all over the place. And they said, we do not want any part of this. When even the group that thinks that we have a disease says nope, and nope's out of there, you done goofed. Not to mention the fact that there were initial cuts of the movie that featured, I don't know how prominent it is in the final cut, but there were definitely scenes featuring something called applied behavioral analysis, which is basically a means of torturing young kids on the spectrum in order to behave correctly. And fun fact, this sort of treatment was used against kids that were deemed at risk of developing sexual disorders, i.e. becoming gay or transgender. So, something that was deemed unfit for gay kids is perfectly fine and acceptable to be used against people with autism. Good to know that's where we stand in the medical community. I, in good conscience, cannot tell you to seek this movie out. Even if you want to see like a so bad, like worst movie of the year sort of thing, don't seek out this movie, for that. Just because it really is I don't want any support for this movie in any regard. I'm covering it because I thought, being on the spectrum, I could give some insight into this whole debacle and this whole nonsense. And plus, I did want to get it out of the way so I never have to think about it again until I'm compiling my, bottom 10 of 2021 list. And man, this is the new low bar. I mean, when you're rated worse than Cats, you made a bad movie. Like, the fact that this is rated worse than one of the biggest debacles in film history in the last, in this century, is something. So there's something for Sia to hang her hat on. The movie itself actually opens with basically a Sia music video, but with Ziegler making this face where the lips are kind of pulled back. It's where the front teeth are showing. And she does that throughout the whole movie, but it's a kind of facial gesture that's associated with people on the spectrum. And then she does dance moves that are sort of like based on stimming, which is something people on the spectrum do where they rapidly, make these movements or wild motions with usually their hands, sometimes their arms. It's a standard thing that they do, but Sia decided, let's turn that into a dance, and it's like, why would you do that? What made you think that this was a good idea? Because I don't want to see things that are, these things that are all associated with being on the spectrum, these things that people already kind of look down at people on the spectrum for doing, and see them treated as like a minstrel show, a fun dance for them to do, for us to do, and it all feels so mocking, like, this thing that you just do because it's how you are. It's a fun dance that I get to put on for everybody to watch, and it's just right from the opening, I felt sick because of that. The thing is, right after that whole music video segment, we get into glitter grade levels of melodrama. Like, we're talking some of the worst garbage, like pop star, projects out there. Glitter, Crossroads. What are some of the other ones? But specifically Glitter. This reeks of Glitter, sort of like just absolute garbage melodrama, and it makes me wonder, like, why are we going from these pretty standard, like, generic, not even good music videos to this garbage story and this really crappy melodrama? Like, what is the connection here? Why are we doing it like this? Of course, once the melodrama kicks in, that's where Ziegler unfortunately gives her worst performance, because she's fine as a dancer, and sadly, Ziegler is basically made to give a simple Jack level performance for somebody on the autism spectrum. Except instead of Ben Stiller making a mockery of how actors will play up, mental conditions for Oscar bait, this is done entirely seriously. But it's of the same quality as Ben Stiller's Simple Jack from Tropic Thunder. Just without any sense of irony or satire or realization that that sort of performance is inherently bad. Of course, I don't want to, I mentioned Ziegler's performance, but I don't want to make it feel like I'm blaming her for this. There's an interview that came out recently that went into how Ziegler, from day one of shooting, was uncomfortable with this sort of performance. And yet it was Sia who said, "Oh no, this is fine, you're doing great, keep going." So Ziegler felt rightly that this was a terrible thing to do. And Sia said, "That's okay, do it anyway." And Sia and Ziegler's relationship is questionable at best. Like, the whole thing of her just constantly bringing on this originally prepubescent girl and now adolescent girl for all of this stuff, and now basically saying, "You're gonna be the autistic kid in my movie," and having her give this performance that she admits she was uncomfortable giving. I do not want the heat to be on Ziegler for this. Like, yeah, she did it, but she was told to do it by somebody by the celebrity who's been in her life for the last, almost a decade. Sia's been a part of Ziggler's life, and they've been collaborating just constantly. And so there's this celebrity who's basically made your career by being in all of her music videos, and she is demanding you give this awful performance, and you don't feel comfortable with it, and she says do it anyway. And yeah, I don't want Ziggler to be the brunt of the criticism here, because I can only imagine that kind of, what kind of stuff she's going through because of what Sia. I don't even know what Sia treats her like in between stuff, but yeah, like the fact that Sia saw that Ziggler was uncomfortable with this performance and told her to keep doing it is just, I mean, that's just awful. That is genuinely awful that you would make somebody do that. That's like Kubrickian levels of just, abusing your actors in order to get something you want. It is, it just does not sit right with me. The worst part of it is I want stories about people on the spectrum to be told. I just want it to be about us. Like, I think Mozart and the Whale gets a pass. It was a movie from 2005. I don't know how many people know about it, but it features Josh Hartnett and Radha Mitchell as two characters on the autism spectrum. Back before it was called that, and they referred to it as Asperger's syndrome. I've since mentioned that designation is not only out of date, but it is kind of bad that we use the name of a guy who worked with the Nazis to describe people on the spectrum. But this was 2005. I think this was right before, or a few years before, the DSM-5 made the official diagnosis autism spectrum disorder. So it was at the time accurate. But the way Hartnett and Mitchell played their characters, the filmmakers respected what it was like to be on the spectrum. The characters were given dignity and respect, and they did feature these characteristics of being on the spectrum, and a lot of the drama was centered around issues that came from being on the spectrum, but it wasn't insulting. They gave the condition a level of dignity, and it wasn't about how, they don't fit in with normal society. It's just about their struggles. And that's the kind of story I want. Like, even though it's clear that Hartnett and Mitchell aren't on the spectrum, it would be nice to have actors on the spectrum be able to portray their story the same way that a deaf actress was able to portray a deaf character in A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place 2. But I'm not so rigid to say that nobody can play somebody on the spectrum. I'm more concerned with how they're playing it. I would much rather have a talented actor who isn't on the spectrum portray a character respectfully than have none at all. Like, if that's my choice, is to have none at all, or have to have a neurotypical actor play somebody on the spectrum, I would rather it be done respectfully than not at all. But ideally, we would have more people on the spectrum able to portray those roles. But my bigger concern is how they're written and directed, more than whether or not the person playing it is neurodivergent or not. Ideally, we just need more neurodivergent actors in general, but that's a whole other fight. But my main concern is that the people telling these stories have respect for us, and Sia clearly does not. Because that's the thing. All the discussion made it seem like Ziggler's character was going to be the center of the movie. Oh, no. You see, this is a Rain Man situation where the actual protagonist is a neurotypical person, while the person on the spectrum is just a side character. Somebody that has to be cared for, and made sure that everything's okay for them. They're barely even a character. No, it's more about this. neurotypical person and their problems and how they have to deal with us. So, thanks for that, Sia. We're doing this shit still. I think the kicker of this all is that the character Ziegler plays is only referred to as music. She isn't even given a real name. Everybody calls her music because she listens to music all the time, through headphones. I think that says everything you need to know about how little her actual character matters, because she isn't even given a real name. It's just music. So the character music is not even the lead character in the movie music. That's how little we matter to Sia. So who is this actual protagonist that we really focus on this whole time? Kate Hudson. Kate Hudson plays music's... God, I hate that that's her name. She plays music's alcoholic sister who, after their grandma passes away, who was music's initial caretaker and guardian, Kate Hudson is brought in to be the next guardian. And it's all about how Kate Hudson's life is hard, y'all. Like, man, isn't it just life so hard for her? I don't want to make it sound like I'm making fun of Hudson's character for being an alcoholic. Much like with people on the spectrum, a lot of people with alcoholism are not taken seriously, specifically in the media. Like, alcoholism is seen as the fun disease, the thing we can all laugh at because look at them. Their life is a downward spiral and they're addicted to a substance. Isn't it fun? Like, that's the kind of seriousness that Sia deals with Hudson's character. She deals with alcoholism as seriously as she deals with autism. So Hudson's whole addiction in a good movie would be the defining part of her character arc. And here, it's just, an excuse for her to act drunk a bunch of times and and the main defining aspect of her character is to whine about how hard she has it. Especially like when she's paired up with Leslie Odom Jr. and we'll get to him. But her whole thing is like Odom is more concerned with making sure that music's okay, and so she whines that you don't love me enough. You care more about my sister. I want someone to love. It's all so bratty and petulant, and like a good director could make her character flaws, tolerable, maybe even good, because it plays into a whole arc. But nah, Sia is incompetent in that regard, and all it comes off with is a petty child with an addiction problem that is never taken seriously. I mentioned that the movie opens with a music video. Well, almost every 10 minutes, on the dot, I count it. I made sure to check every time a music video segment popped up. It is almost like every 10 minutes on the dot, Sia devolves into just a random music video. And like, that would be one thing, but these are not good music videos. These feel like generic, almost corporate music videos, like the kind of stuff they make for a Target commercial or something. Every time one came up, I expected a corporate logo to pop up at the end. Here's the generic song that isn't good. Oh God, we'll get into the actual music. But every time this video pops up, I swear it's just gonna cut back to buy Starbucks or buy Walmart. Something. It feels corporate and callous and cold. It doesn't feel like somebody with actual passion, especially a musician, made these music videos. Which is the other thing. Beyonce has done a bunch of popular and well-regarded visual albums. Lemonade more so than Black is King, but Black is King I think is still, at least respected. But Beyonce has proven that the visual album can be done and is good enough to, if you're a good enough filmmaker, you can make this whole visual album thing and make it interesting and good. So why didn't Sia just do that? Why include this whole melodrama and all of these terrible characters and this terrible writing? Why not just do a visual album? Make it like one of her music videos and make it like a string as it plays, and do that. Why not just do a visual album? She would have saved herself so much criticism if it was just a visual album. And I don't know why she felt the need to throw in this garbage movie in between pretty generic and forgettable music videos. Speaking of generic and forgettable, the music. The actual music, like, that's the thing. I'm not a Sia fan. I don't really, seek her out. But I recognize that she has good music. I recognize that she has produced good music. None of that talent into music making went into this movie. For a movie that she felt so strongly about putting these things that quote-unquote needed to be there about the autistic character, she didn't even care enough to make good music. For a movie called Music, featuring a character named Music, you'd think that she would have given a crap about the music. But Sia cared as much about the music as she did about an accurate portrayal of autism. The music here is some of the most forgettable, just absolutely this is album filler music. None of this feels like it's worth making the movie all about music and making these music videos all about these songs that aren't even that good. At least make the music good and we may have something to give you. Oh, this movie is absolute garbage and misrepresents autism and it's terrible with these characters. But at least the music was good. The music's not even good. So the whole reason to make it all about music isn't even worth having. It just so the one thing driving this whole endeavor is worthless. Oh, but we've only scratched the surface. The autism was one thing. The addiction is another. Let's talk about the side characters. Yeah, one of the most prominent side character is Leslie Odom Jr., who is a Ghanaian immigrant, I believe, and his main defining characteristic is that he is there to help music and is just forced together with Kate Hudson just because. Not because they have chemistry or they are good together, but because they are the two leading neurodivergent characters. So they have to end up together by filmmaking law, apparently. But no. The thing with Junior's character, Odom Jr.'s character, is he got AIDS. And the movie treats that as respectfully as I just did. So yeah, autism. Serious condition, affects so many people and those around them, should be treated with respect. Alcoholism, same thing. Serious condition, affects so many people and those around them, should be treated with respect. AIDS, HIV, life-threatening disease. Horrible thing that ruins people's quality of life and is devastating. Treated with the same respect as the breast cancer subplot in The Room. That's how seriously this was. This is less respectful than Temptation Confessions of a Marriage Counselor. Tyler Perry handled AIDS better than Sia. Let that sink in. Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's just AIDS and then it's never brought up again. It's just oh, I have AIDS. Never going to talk about that again. Just going to completely forget that ever happened. It is so superfluous to the actual plot. It just is thrown in there to make his character sad. Wow, Sia. Oh, but we haven't gotten to the best part. No, the autism is bad. The addiction's bad. The AIDS is just heinous, what she did. But how about the fat Asian kid who is forced to box by his abusive father, doesn't even get to say a single line in the movie, and then just dies. His wife-beater-wearing, wife-beating dad kills this kid because he's not a man enough, and that's the only Asian representation you get in the whole movie. I want to try and understand what made her think this was a good idea. What made her think that doing these things was okay? Because not every depiction of a group needs to be the most positive, just absolutely paragon. But if the only representation you have in a movie is an effeminate kid abused by his literally wife beater wearing dad the whole movie, and he doesn't even get to say a real line, and all that happens is the dad screams, and I hope it's actual Chinese, because if not, I would not be surprised if the guy didn't even speak a real Asian language. I would not be shocked from Sia at this point. But that's the only Asian representation you get in basically the entire movie? I'm speechless. I'm genuinely speechless that this happened. I'm genuinely speechless. Like, that's the thing. It doesn't even play into the actual plot. Like, the main characters don't even realize that it happens. It just happens so that we suffer and we have to endure it and nobody else does. Because Sia hates us. That is the only reasoning I can think of for her to do this. Because she genuinely despises humanity and thinks we deserve this, whatever it is. Oh, by the way, all of these awful things, sprinkle in Ben Schwartz as a gay stereotype. So just get everybody in there. Get the African man with AIDS. Get the white chick with alcoholism. Get the kid on the spectrum that's a gross caricature. Get the abusive Asian dad who kills his son. And then sprinkle in a little flamboyant gay stereotype. Because why not? This is the worst movie of 2021 by far. Like, Justice League is going to have to be really bad to overcome this. And that's going to have 4 hours. So, it's going to have 4 hours to be as awful as this was in 90 minutes. I think 100 minutes, whatever. On top of everything else, it would be one thing that this was just critically panned across the board. Everyone said, "What the hell is wrong with you," to Sia. But the Hollywood Foreign Language Press, or Foreign Press Association, whatever the term, the group behind the Golden Globes, saw that Sia made a musical, and it starred Kate Hudson, and said, put that as a nomination. Nominate this movie. Because apparently they didn't even bother watching it. They just said, Sia made a musical, we need another comedy or musical. You know, forget Birds of Prey, an actual comedy that's good. Forget Emma, an actual comedy that's good. Forget, all of that. No, we need to make sure to commemorate Sia's horrible, awful, autistic hate movie. It is genuinely... I haven't even scratched the surface of how awful the depiction of autism is. It's just genuinely reprehensible. And the fact that the people behind the Golden Globes said, this is okay, even if it doesn't win, it would be a miracle if either Hudson or this movie won. But the fact that they were even nominated shows how little respect the Golden Globes have for us. Like, award shows are always garbage. They're always, in-house back-patting and saying, good job, and it's all about networking and the people you know and who has the most influence. It's never a meritocracy. It's never truly about who was the best. It was always about who has the best connections. It's always been that. But just the fact, this puts them on Grammy levels for how despicable they are. Fuck you, Golden Globes. All things being said, I don't think I ever really do this. I'm somebody who is all for the ethical consumption of movies. I would much rather pay whatever the legal means for consuming a movie is rather than stealing it, because I want that filmmaker to be, I want that filmmaker to be compensated. If we were stuck in this capitalistic society, I would much rather compensate somebody for their work than not. I don't want anybody behind this movie to be compensated. If you do want to suffer through this like I did, do not pay for it. Do not give them one red cent. I don't want this movie to fail financially as bad as it did critically. Like, we're talking worst of 2021, maybe worst of the century. I'd have to... this is a real contender for one of the worst movies ever made. And if you want to endure it and suffer through it, do not do it by giving them money. Do not compensate them for making you suffer.